The man, whose eyes bulged like brass bells, advanced slowly through a hail of bullets. His body was already riddled with holes. Eventually, he fell. The man watching him fall to the ground laughed triumphantly. At that moment, the wind started howling, and a blood moon appeared. His body began to rapidly heal. In no time, this man named Alucard was fully revived. The story takes place last century in a remote village where women kept disappearing near a church, casting a pall of death over the entire village. Following clues, the police soon arrived in front of the church. Under the dim light, they saw a priest gnawing on the body of a woman. But in the next second, many zombies burst out of the church, all lunging at the police. Despite being armed, their weapons were useless against such foes. Headquarters, upon receiving the message, immediately sought help from Hellsing, an organization specialized in dealing with supernatural entities. Hellsing's leader, Integra, had already dispatched her ace, known as the King of Vampires, Alucard. At that moment, policewoman Seras was hanging by a thread. The only survivor among the investigating officers, Seras was brutally grabbed by the priest who couldn't wait to assault her. Suddenly, an oppressive presence filled the air. When he came to his senses, he saw Alucard standing before him. The seasoned priest recognized him instantly as a vampire but couldn't understand why he willingly served humans. The evil priest merely gestured, and all the ghouls fired together. Alucard's body was instantly riddled with bullets, his arms shot off. Seeing this, the priest laughed heartily, thinking he had completely eliminated his enemy. But then, a mocking laugh echoed as the moon turned blood red. Countless wisps of black smoke converged on Alucard, and his mutilated body began to heal. The revived Alucard seemed even stronger. With a wave of his hand, a specially made 13mm silver cross spear appeared. In an instant, Alucard transformed into the messenger of hell, and all the ghouls were instantly killed. The desperate priest, driven to despair, took policewoman Seras as a hostage. Unconventionally, Alucard asked Seras if she was a virgin. Upon receiving an affirmative answer, Alucard shot and completely eliminated the priest. Seras was also accidentally hit in the lung, and her life quickly ebbed away. Yet, with her parents' vengeance unfulfilled, she unwillingly stretched out her arm. Before collapsing, Alucard grasped her small palm. When Seras awoke, she found herself not dead, but now possessed 2 sharp fangs, and by misfortune, she became a member of Hellsing. He is the strongest force of Iscariot, Vatican Section 13, the spokesperson for divine punishment on Earth, known in the dark world as the King of Gun and Sword. This knight named Anderson, an ace in dealing with dark creatures, coldly descended the steps, his blood-stained knife gleaming coldly in the dark. He approached Alucard step by step. A battle between aces was about to begin. Just recently, Alucard and Seras, under the orders of the Hellsing organization, set out to eliminate a rampaging vampire. Seras, newly transformed into a vampire, under Alucard's personal demonstration, strove to overcome her inner discomfort, continuously killing a large number of ghouls. Stimulated by the scent of blood, her eyes turned blood red. Eventually, she crushed the last ghoul underfoot. Suddenly, a sharp sword pierced through Seras, and then more swords thoroughly impaled her. These swords were blessed gunblades, their hilts shimmering with runes capable of inflicting great damage to the Nightbreed. Immediately after, countless charms flew to every corner, and a barrier sealed off the area. Alucard knew that the church had arrived. Facing this opponent, the noble and handsome Alucard, dressed in splendid red, walked straight towards this intensely oppressive paladin. After they crossed paths, Paladin Anderson quickly turned and plunged 2 swords into Alucard's body. Alucard, far from defenseless, responded by shooting Anderson in the head. However, this was hardly a severe injury for the fallen Anderson. Taking advantage of Alucard's momentary distraction, he leaped up and stabbed Alucard with 2 more swords. Surprised, Alucard launched a fierce counterattack, and a grand battle of guns and swords unfolded. Anderson charged directly at Alucard, who dodged and fired several shots, while Anderson also launched a fierce counterattack. Ultimately, in a flash, Anderson's thrown sword riddled Alucard with holes, and with one final strike, blood splattered as Alucard's head was severed. The victorious Anderson laughed wildly and turned to finish off Seras, only to realize she had already fled with Alucard's head. The wounded Seras didn't get far before Anderson caught up. Alucard's head was also nailed to a wall. Anderson continued to close in on Seras, who was blocked by the barrier and had nowhere to escape. At that moment, his head also turned into fresh blood. Alucard had her drink the blood to become a true vampire. Seras hesitated. She was not yet ready to become a true vampire. Fortunately, Integra arrived in time to save her. In Anderson's eyes, all night creatures must be eradicated. No one could stop him. Integra disdainfully remarked, as countless bats flew around, that the strongest vampire, created by the Hellsing family over centuries, would not die so easily. Thus, he revived. Disbelieving, Anderson severed Alucard's arms, but in an instant, Alucard fully recovered. Knowing he could not kill Alucard, Paladin Anderson could only teleport away. Who allowed the Vampire King Alucard to unleash his previously sealed powerful Cromwell restraint formula? In the endless darkness, he manifested countless crimson eyes, summoning the bloodthirsty Baroque werewolf's minions, releasing a terrifying aura. Unable to suppress their devouring desire, they fiercely pounced on the already terrified enemies. The collapsing enemies had their legs broken and fell at the exit steps. Alucard was disappointed. He had thought this Class A vampire might bring him a bit of fun, but it turned out to be utterly weak, leaving him feeling uninterested. Alucard once again unleashed the werewolves, completely overwhelming the mentally shattered enemy. Just before this, a man named Luke, at the Hellsing organization's headquarters entrance, merely snapped his fingers, and the guards were shot in the head. He and his brother John led an armed ghoul squad to begin an assault on Hellsing's headquarters. At this moment, Integra is chairing a round-table meeting with 12 influential individuals, including royal nobles, to discuss the frequent vampire incidents. She has discovered that each vampire eliminated had a transmitter on them, and concludes that a mysterious organization must be orchestrating everything. Just as she finishes speaking, the security room reports a massive ghoul invasion at headquarters. Facing the formidable firepower of the fully armed undead ghouls and the vampire John wielding 2 submachine guns, the security team is forced to retreat, powerless to respond. Eventually, the security room is overrun. Integra watches in fury as the bodies of her team members are devoured by ghouls, and Jan licks the fresh blood. She contacts her butler, Walter, and orders him to quickly eliminate the enemy, sparing none. Walter splits their forces into 2 groups. He and Seras head to the 3rd floor meeting room to protect Integra and the round table dignitaries, while the Vampire King, Alucard, is enough on his own to eliminate all invaders. The vampire Luke, guided by the aura emitted by Alucard, locks onto his location and starts to close in. Despite numerous traps, Luke easily evades them. The approaching security team, under his swift and lightning-fast attacks, is brutally slaughtered in moments. Luke then finds the entrance to the basement where he has been waiting for a long time. In the deep underground, they both draw guns, and 2 dull roars of gunfire echo. Both are shot in the head, but as vampires, this is hardly an injury for them. They rise and begin a frenzied shootout. Luke dodges every bullet, while Alucard does not bother to move, showing the disparity in their strength. In their initial encounter, Alucard relishes the long-missed joy of battle, smiling grimly as blood flows freely, then unleashes his full power, devouring Luke, who becomes part of his river of death. Walter, the Hellsing family butler, known as the strongest human reaper, wields flexible wire weapons capable of apocalyptic destruction. In his youth, he could easily shred 100-meter concrete buildings with his metal wires, invisible to the naked eye. Even the ferocious Baroque werewolf is but a whimpering puppy before him. Seeing Walter and Seras arrive just in time through the ventilation ducts at the 3rd floor meeting room, the hearts of the round table dignitaries are finally set at ease. After all, the reputation of Reaper Walter is enough to deter any petty villain. Jan, leading the armed ghouls, has already approached the meeting room. Walter steps out, and with a slight movement of his hand, his shimmering wire and the aura of death leap towards the enemy. Jan's cigar is split in 2, and the ghouls wearing bulletproof vests behind him are instantly slaughtered. A cold sweat breaks out on Jan as he orders the ghouls to open fire frantically, but the dense barrage of bullets cannot stop Walter's advancing steps. Jan, embracing his madness, calls for the ghouls holding bulletproof shields to form an impenetrable formation and charge forward. It's time to call for heavy artillery to sweep the area. Seras, armed with a heavy cannon, fires a shell that, with a thunderous roar, annihilates all ghouls in its trajectory. Then, under Walter's command, Seras switches to armor-piercing incendiary rounds and fires again at the ghouls. Jan, wielding dual guns, rushes forward planning to kill Seras first, blatantly underestimating Death Reaper Walter. Walter blocked him and precisely removed his lip piercing. Just as Seras was about to deal with Jan, ghoul reinforcements arrived. These were all ghouls transformed from the police squad. Jan took the opportunity to break free from the policewoman's control, retreating into the group of ghouls that had been the defense forces. Then he rushed towards the conference hall, bravely facing Walter's sharp steel wires, sacrificing one arm to burst in, prepared to wreak havoc, but instead he was met with countless bullets. Seras, unable to bring herself to strike her former comrades, exploded under the siege of ghouls. Her eyes turned blood red, and she furiously killed all the ghouls. Fortunately, Integra embraced her, rescuing her from her confusion. Ultimately, when Integra demanded to know who was behind it all, he suddenly self-combusted into ashes, leaving only the keyword Millennium. The Millennium organization sent synthetic vampires. Lieutenant Alhambra excited Alucard's urge for battle, and he, this time, might be able to satisfy Alucard fully. Since Hellsing headquarters last suffered an attack from the mysterious organization Millennium, Integra swore to eradicate this group. Eventually, she obtained information about Millennium from Commander Maxwell of Iscariot, Vatican Section 13, revealing they were remnants of defeated Nazi Germany from World War II. The Millennium organization, now hidden in the Samba nation of South America, aimed to annihilate their enemies. Integra dispatched Alucard along with Seras and the mercenary Pip Vernaded to South America. Shortly after checking into the hotel, Alucard was attacked by Millennium. They sent Alhambra to confront Alucard head-on. He possessed a vampire's physique, bringing superhuman strength and speed. His sharp playing cards could easily penetrate almost any object, causing fierce explosions. In a high-speed movement, Alucard struck this man, but his body surprisingly disintegrated into playing cards. This was his card clone. His real body emerged from behind Alucard, striking Alucard and knocking him back. Then, with a snap of his fingers, playing cards surrounded the fallen Alucard, creating a ring of explosions. But Alucard had already moved past, rushing towards the hotel rooftop, with Alhambra in close pursuit. Seras arrived, firing wildly at Alhambra, whose rapidly orbiting cards defended him, even cutting artillery shells in half. Seeing this, Alucard released his own seal. His eyes turned crimson again, and his power surged. The gate of death had been opened for Alhambra. His legs were directly shattered by the bursting Alucard. Defeated in front of the unleashed Alucard, Alucard gripped his head, his bloodthirsty fangs exposed. From his blood, Alucard saw the true mastermind behind the Millennium organization, the Major. This was an eerie old smoothbore gun in the hands of a woman with a devilish smile. A gunshot thundered, a magic bullet streaking out with a blue glow. If someone could predict its mysterious trajectory, even a speedily moving vampire could be killed in one shot. Her magic bullet possessed unstoppable, terrifying power, even destroying a supersonic jet at invisible altitudes. She was a lieutenant of the Millennium Organization's werewolf squad, the female vampire Winkle. To address the impending crisis, Commander Maxwell began purging the Vatican internally, executing the European bishops who colluded with the Millennium Organization. Under his orders, Paladin Anderson suppressed his own desire to kill Alucard and personally delivered the church's letter. Subsequently, the Queen convened all members of the Round Table, and discussions with the Vatican began on a strategy. Alucard also told them that during World War II, this German major conspired to create an army entirely composed of vampires, but his plan was thwarted by Alucard and Walter at the time. Now, they have formed Millennium's last battalion, ready to make a comeback. No sooner had the words been spoken than a cat-eared boy suddenly appeared in the grand hall of the Round Table meeting. He was Warrant Officer Schrodinger, sent by the Major. Facing everyone, the Major crazily declared that they were unworthy of being his targets. His true targets were the Rotten Kingdom and the Undying King, Alucard. To lure Alucard away from the foggy city and launch an attack, the Major had Winkle seize the Rotten Kingdom's aircraft carrier, planning to draw Alucard out to the sea. In order to approach the carrier, Alucard piloted a fighter jet, diving vertically from high above. Her magic bullets fired, knocking down the SR-71 Blackbird fighter jet. As the jet plummeted, Alucard broke his seals. To her senses, the terrifying aura only grew denser. Endless darkness enveloped her, and she was petrified with fear. Under the cross-shaped wreckage of the burning jet, Alucard appeared amid the roaring flames, approaching Winkle with the steps of death. At this moment, the soldiers of the Millennium organization on the fleet unleashed a barrage of gunfire at Alucard. However, facing the unleashed power of Alucard, the flowers of annihilation bloomed for them. Winkle, terrified beyond measure, hid herself. Finally, under the moonlit night facing Alucard, she wiped away her tears and mustered her last courage. Dragging beams of blue magical bullets, she launched a torrential attack on Alucard. The unpredictable trajectory of her attacks splattered Alucard with blood everywhere. Alucard seemed powerless to retaliate, but a dangerous aura emanated from him. He caught the bullets with his clenched teeth directly. In the next second, the bullets shattered into blue light and dissipated. Winkle's last courage faded. She was snatched up by Alucard, who pierced her heart with an old-fashioned smoothbore gun. It was all over for her. She became part of Alucard's river of blood under the blood-red moonlight. Only Alucard, holding that old-fashioned smoothbore gun, remained. Elsewhere, the Major, aboard a Zeppelin, led the Avengers back to the mortal world under the blood-red moon, arriving over the foggy city. A crisis was nearing. Over the city, the Zeppelin launched endless missiles, screeching across the night sky to the horrified gazes of the people. Big Ben exploded, the Empire State Building exploded, and the entire world seemed to tremble. But for the Major, it was not enough. Facing the fire and smoke below in the foggy city, an army entirely composed of vampires was deployed. In the howling wind, fully armed, they plunged down one by one. These bloodthirsty demons, unable to suppress their bloodlust and ferocious nature, slaughtered every living being in sight, pouring death recklessly into the night of the foggy city. The city was engulfed in endless blood and fire. Meanwhile, inside the Zeppelin, the Major leisurely enjoyed his steak. More terrifying events occurred. All those innocently slain rose as ghouls. The entire foggy city fell. The city's defense forces were annihilated by the vampire army. In the command center headquarters of the Rotten Kingdom, alarms blared. Communication at the Royal Air Force Base headquarters was completely disrupted. It was only then that General Penwood of the Round Table meeting realized that war had come. Before he could react, an army stormed into the headquarters, having pledged their allegiance to the Millennium organization for immortality. Seeing Integra in the command center was an unexpected surprise for them, but in reality, it was a nightmare, because Death himself, Walter, intervened. Their barrage of bullets was blocked by Walter's steel wires. In just a few seconds, they were all slaughtered by Walter. Integra urged General Penwood to evacuate, but he refused. Despite his profound fear, as a soldier, he chose not to retreat this time. Alone in the command center, General Penwood looked at the pistol Integra had left him before returning to the Hellsing headquarters. He recalled the first time he met Integra. She was just a child then, and under his watch, she had grown up. In the end, under the horrified gaze of the vampires storming the command center, he detonated the bomb, perishing alongside them. Meanwhile, Integra and Walter were frantically rushing back to the Hellsing headquarters. They stopped on a street where Walter sensed a terrifying presence at the end of the road. A formidable enemy had appeared. He got out of the car and urged Integra to flee at full speed, as he was no match for this powerful adversary in his current state. Alone, he faced the Millennium organization's strongest trump card, Captain Belbrough, who effortlessly caught the supposedly indestructible wires with one hand. Integra, now alone, was discovered by the vampire army. Chased by vampires with superhuman speed, her speeding car broke down under intense gunfire, and she was eventually surrounded by vampires. Preparing for a last stand at that moment, countless biblical runes descended, and blessed bayonets pierced through the undead bodies of the vampires. The Vatican's strongest holy knight, Anderson, had arrived. Maxwell from the church hoped that the Hellsing and Millennium organizations would weaken each other, allowing the church to claim the final victory. However, since he considered the Hellsing organization a lifelong enemy, it was up to him to defeat them, even if it meant disobeying orders. Anderson turned to face the vampire army, his sword in hand, backed by the traitorous priests of Section 13. Fearless in the face of the vampires, they recited the Song of Iscariot, unafraid of death, and they annihilated all the vampires. As the grim reapers of life, countless V-1 modified missiles tore through the night sky towards the Hellsing headquarters. Millennium's major had sent a raiding force, but suddenly, precise cannon fire exploded them all, bursting into numerous fireworks in the sky. A-class vampire Zoran Blitz ordered the searchlights to be turned on, revealing the ferocious Seras, standing with her arms crossed, shouldering a massive 345-kilogram Barkanen semi-automatic cannon with a huge magazine strapped to her back. Only a vampire's superhuman constitution could handle such a fearsome weapon. Under the command of mercenary captain Pip Bernadotte, Seras, with her crimson eyes blazing, raised the 3-meter-long cannon barrel. The black muzzle aimed at the Zeppelin in the sky, then like a torrent of steel, a barrage of fire, driven by the chain of ammunition, sprayed wildly from the barrel, carrying the vengeful desires of the spirits of the foggy city. Under the intense barrage, Lieutenant Zoran Blitz could only direct the severely damaged Zeppelin towards Seras. At a critical moment, the Barkanen's second attack mode was activated. The cannon barrel raised again, firing 2 wide-area suppression Vladimir explosive shells, carrying the scent of death towards the airship. In the sky, they detonated violently, and ultimately the airship crashed. But it wasn't over yet. They were vampires. Such an explosion was not enough to take them all out. The remaining vampires stood up one by one from the blazing fire. Under the leadership of Zoran Blitz, scythe in hand, they charged towards the Hellsing headquarters. The mercenaries in charge of defense were already prepared. They had laid a large number of landmines in advance. The rapidly advancing vampires were blown to pieces. The vampires stopped in horror. However, this was all within Pip Bernadotte's expectations. The mercenaries detonated the blessed bombs. The arrogant vampires, several more were sent skyward. Following the original plan, the battle-hardened mercenaries launched incendiary shells. Intense gunfire began to cover the vampire army comprehensively. The well-ambushed machine gun teams also started firing wildly. The vampires suffered heavy casualties. Just then, a ferocious pair of purple eyes opened. Zoran Blitz unleashed her Grade A vampire abilities. The mad whispers of demons began to sound. Under the blood moon, she placed her palm on the ground. Her muscular arms swelled. Dense runes moved about as if alive. Characters wriggled on the ground. And then, like worms, they piled up and swelled, eventually morphing into a vague, gigantic humanoid figure. After a moment of writhing, it transformed into the laughing face of Zoran Blitz. Fear descended upon all the mercenaries. Then the giant lieutenant raised her scythe and cleaved the headquarters in 2 with a single strike. The mercenaries suffered heavy losses. Faced with such a terrifying opponent, they lost their will to fight. Seras, as a fledgling vampire of Alucard, realized something was wrong. This was an illusion. Her eyes turned red, and the illusion finally dissipated. However, she couldn't awaken the mercenaries trapped in the illusion. She raised her cannon and frantically fired at the position of Lieutenant Zoran Blitz. Finally, she broke the lieutenant's illusion. But it was already too late. The swiftly moving vampire army bypassed the minefield from both sides and finally stormed into the gates of Hellsing. In front of these vampires, the mercenaries stood no chance. Facing the crisis, Pip Bernadotte gathered all the surviving mercenaries, ready to make their last stand. These dedicated mercenaries were prepared to make this place their grave, and Seras, as the ace, was sent out to seek a chance to kill these demons. Before she left, Pip Bernadotte attempted to steal a kiss from Seras, but did not succeed. In the distance, the ferocious Lieutenant Zoran Blitz laughed bizarrely. She was a powerful Grade A vampire under Major's command in the Millennium organization, her ghastly, rune-covered face, her right palm glowing with a purple demonic eye, possessing eerie, illusory abilities that could evoke the most painful memories in the hearts of those caught in her spells. And she, like a devil, descended. The vampire army had already stormed into the Hellsing headquarters building. The mercenaries' gunfire was powerless. Every inch of Hellsing headquarters was quickly overrun by the invading vampires. Building B had fallen, and Pip Bernadotte and the remaining mercenaries held out at the last stronghold. But the sinisterly smiling Zoran Blitz had reached here with her vampires. Most of the mercenaries had lost their ability to fight. Suddenly, a rocket blasted through the entrance fortifications. The mercenaries were hit hard again. Just as they were about to fire another rocket, Seras finally arrived. The cannon fire from her cannon began to pour out furiously. All vampires, except for Zoran Blitz, were killed. Zoran Blitz launched her illusion again. A mesmerizing purple light covered the entire corridor. The illusionary barrier was activated. Seras was overwhelmed. Although she knew it was an illusion, her unquenched thirst made her unable to resist the full force of the vampire's illusion. Memories of her deep-seated sorrow surged forth. Memories of her lonely past living in the orphanage, watching helplessly as her parents were mercilessly killed. Overwhelmed by grief, she was unable to break free from these painful memories, and tears stopped her in her tracks. In that moment, Zoran Blitz took advantage of her vulnerability, approaching swiftly and severing her entire arm with a scythe, then knocking Seras to the ground with another strike. Zoran Blitz grabbed Seras by the head, blinding her eyes, embodying the madness of a bloodthirsty frenzy. Standing over the severely injured Seras, Zoran Blitz raised her scythe to deliver the killing blow. Just then, Pip Bernadotte, wielding a baseball bat, ambushed her from behind. Other mercenaries emerged and temporarily subdued Zoran Blitz. Pip Bernadotte hurriedly carried the blood-soaked Seras towards the defensive fortifications. Suddenly, a surviving vampire opened fire on him. Despite being shot multiple times, he did not fall. Carrying Seras, he made his way back step by step. However, it was not meant for them to reach their destination together. Pip was impaled by the recovered Zoran Blitz's scythe and finally fell, his blood flowing uncontrollably like a fountain. Weakened, he leaned against the wall. Struggling, Seras crawled towards him and finally reached his side. Pip Bernadotte lifted Seras, and this time, he finally kissed her. With a smile before dying, he said, "Don't cry, Seras. You are a strong girl. Eat me." Then he could hold on no longer and collapsed. Blinded, Seras groped and embraced him, sobbing mournfully. Memories of their time together kept flooding back, and her tears flowed incessantly. The terrifying Zoran Blitz, with reinforcements of vampires, closed in on them. With no way out, she launched another illusion. Was it all over? Seras caressed the face of the deceased Pip Bernadotte and began to suck his blood. The blood around her began to flow back into her body. For him, she awakened. Her crimson eyes opened, and her blood-red energy transformed into the arm she had lost. As Zoran Blitz watched in horror, the illusionary barrier was shattered. Seras charged towards her blood enemies. Her moment of vengeance had come. All the reinforcements of vampires were annihilated by her. Zoran Blitz was also pinned to the ground by her hand. Even as she launched another illusion, in Seras's heart, her memories were already filled with Pip Bernadotte. She had become one with him, his blood mingling with hers. Finally, Seras slammed Zoran Blitz against the wall, killing her. After everything ended, Seras took one last look at the deceased Pip Bernadotte. Blood-red energy transformed into wings, carrying her towards the foggy city. Because she had promised Pip Bernadotte to bring despair and death to those innocent vampires. He had been the prince of the Wallachian Principality, the powerful commander of the Wallachian Royal Knights. He had fought for his faith but was cruelly betrayed by fate. Eventually, he renounced his faith, feasting on blood to become the king of vampires, turning blood into the currency of a hellish song. 500 years later, he chanted the sealing words of the Ripley Scrolls. The blood began to surge and spread, and the departed spirits appeared in the endless river of death. These were the Janissaries of the Ottoman Empire and the Wallachian Royal Knights. The Type 0 Death River was activated. The night wind, carrying the scent of blood and the smell of burning, blew from across the river. Maxwell, intoxicated by the wind filled with blood and fire, believed it to be divine retribution against Protestant heretics. To reclaim the corrupted nation from the hands of heretics and monsters, the Vatican's Ninth Crusade was launched. The sword brethren of the Teutonic Order, the Knights of Calatrava, and the Knights of Malta, donned in their church's crusader robes, stood solemnly in the night wind. They knelt solemnly before Maxwell, newly appointed by the Pope as the Archbishop and commander of the crusade. Then all the crusaders shouted the slogan, Amen. With faith and glory, they lined up and entered the armed transport aircraft. This time, all heretics would be destroyed under their weapons. As they rushed towards the foggy city at dusk, spread with blood and fire, the people of the city, struggling in their hellish conditions, saw what appeared to be angels in the sky and clung to their last hope. However, these angels in the night were cold and ruthless, devoid of any warmth. In the sky, Maxwell, from his podium suspended in the transport helicopter, commanded as the cannons on the helicopter began to rotate, and suddenly the sound of numerous guns firing filled the night sky. The scent of death once again enveloped the foggy city. Integra, within the city, clenched her fists tightly, staring as the crusaders recklessly unleashed fire and destruction. They were no different from the vampires. They were enemies of Hellsing. Anderson, silently observing everything, was also infuriated, viewing Maxwell as having betrayed their faith. Following Maxwell's orders, the treacherous priests of Section 13 attempted to capture Integra, but Seras arrived just in time to repel them. The descending crusaders began to form ranks, adopting a battle stance. The vampires, who had been rampaging through the streets, also gathered, armed, and faced the crusaders in this hellish realm. At that moment, the immortal king Alucard returned, wearing an expectant and frenzied smile, like a demon descending from the heavens, falling between the crusader forces and the last battalion. Standing between the two armies, and then, accompanied by sacred biblical runes, Anderson, the strongest knight of the treacherous Section 13, arrived on the battlefield with a deadly aura. From the airship, a black figure with crimson eyes, a werewolf, dropped down. They all stared intently at Alucard in front of them. Integra gave Alucard the final command as everyone sensed the impending fear. Anderson initiated the attack, followed by the captain. Both the Crusaders and the last battalion opened fire frenziedly towards the center of the monstrous being, where blood mist expanded as if alive, writhing within. Like a black hole, it swallowed all the bullets. The chanting continued, and the final notes of the end emanated from the depths of the blood mist. Alucard activated Level 0, Blood River, and the beings he had devoured reappeared from the River of Death. In the spreading river of fresh blood, the valiant knights of the Royal Order of Wallachia appeared, neatly lining up behind Alucard. Finally, under Alucard's command, they charged towards the enemy. The Crusaders and the last battalion had no power to resist. They were all pulled into the River of Death. The terrified Maxwell commanded the armed helicopters to strafe wildly, but they were systematically destroyed by the resurrected Class A vampires, Alhambra and Winkle. Ultimately, he too was shot down. Under Anderson's watchful eye, swallowed by the River of Death, all part of the Major's grand scheme. He stood atop the Zeppelin, facing the fog of blood and fire, commencing his symphony as the conductor. For all the players had taken their stage. He is the king of monsters, Alucard. After releasing countless undead, he also freed his former self. Yes, he has returned, the once Count Dracula. As countless biblical runes fell, Anderson, sword in hand, descended from the heavens. Dracula drew his longsword, clashing swords with Anderson, sparks flying. Anderson's mission was to completely eradicate the fool, Dracula. After a roar of Amen, Anderson charged towards Alucard. His holy power vowed to purify all evil. Dracula, sword in hand, met his attack, and after a stalemate, the mighty Anderson showed him the hope of finally resting in peace, just like 500 and 100 years ago. Anderson charged again. A fierce melee ensued. Anderson hurled 6 gun swords at him. He shattered them all and wounded Anderson. He transformed back into the vampire king, Alucard. He raised his custom Jackal handgun. It was aimed at Anderson, charging again. Gunfire roared. The bullet tore through half of Anderson's arm, and Alucard retreated back among the army of the undead. The magic bullet shooter, Winkle, and the cardmaster, Alhambra, also took the opportunity to severely wound Anderson again. As a pure believer, such injuries were nothing to him. Anderson, facing the endless undead, clutched his left arm in his teeth, handing over the sword with his right hand. Under Alucard's shocked gaze, he lunged at the distant foe. As a sword-bearing divine punishment, how could it fall so easily? Yet he faced Alucard, the immortal king of monsters. Anderson eventually exhausted his strength, and in the River of Death, the mighty Wallachian Royal Knights began their charge. In this moment of crisis, the traitorous priests of Section 13 returned. How could they abandon Anderson and flee back to the Vatican? It was no different from abandoning their faith. They recited the Song of Iscariot again, risking their lives, unleashing powerful forces in the darkness. The wounded Anderson finally stood before Alucard. Facing this terrifying heretic, Anderson wielded a holy relic soaked in divine blood, the Nail of Helena. Seeing the priest holding the holy nail, Alucard pleaded with him not to become a monster like himself. But for Anderson, he was merely a blade that eliminates sinners, merely God's servant executing wrath on earth. If the holy nail could grant him his wish to destroy the monster, what did it matter if he became a monster himself? Then Anderson knelt down, plunging the nail of Helena into his own heart, and under the divine power of the holy nail, he transformed into the Thorns priest. Alucard was angry, disappointed to have to deal with Anderson. But at this moment, Anderson was no longer human. He had become a monster like Alucard. They were evenly matched. Thorns priest Anderson formed his gun swords into a cross. Alucard also drew a cross with a reverse stroke. The battle between the two monsters began. Alucard could no longer easily injure Anderson. He leapt up, thorns behind him morphing into angelic wings. Wielding the sword of divine punishment, he pierced through Alucard's skull. The dense thorns, with holy power, sealed Alucard. Sacred fire blazed fiercely. All the undead in the River of Death continuously withered away. In this holy fire, all souls were liberated and ascended. In the fiery blaze, Alucard fell into memories from 500 years ago, those unbearable memories. Once he was also a sword of divine punishment for God, yet ultimately destroyed by his own faith. He chose to abandon everything. He gradually woke up under Seras's continuous calling. He stood up and grabbed Anderson's thorn-clad hand holding the sword. This ends now. Only humans can ever defeat monsters. The runes on Alucard's arm lit up as he charged directly towards Anderson, pushing through the thorns continuously. Finally, with a burst of blood splattering, Alucard's right hand pierced directly through Anderson's chest. Looking at the broken Anderson on the ground, Alucard was reminded of his own past self. Anderson, having regained his senses, smiled painfully. He understood Alucard too. Anderson gradually lost his breath and eventually turned to ash and disappeared in a breeze. This was the long-plotted betrayal of Death Walter. 55 years ago, in his arrogant confidence, he used all his strength but could not defeat the captain. Yet Alucard appeared and easily drove the captain back. From that moment, the seed of betrayal was sown. Even bearing the name of betrayal, even facing an opponent known to be unbeatable, as long as there was a slight chance to defeat the Vampire King Alucard, nothing else mattered. 55 years later, he accepted the Major's modifications to his body. Now possessing a vampire's body, the moment to battle Alucard had come. The cold, gleaming wires flew from afar, easily destroying numerous buildings. Death Walter had arrived. He crushed the last remnants of Anderson with his foot. To him now the dead were just trash. Integra incredulously watched the young Walter before her. He had betrayed her. This time he stood here for himself. He was no longer the butler of Hellsing. Seeing Walter insult the dead Anderson, the traitorous Section 13's Yumi was furiously enraged. She charged at him, drawing her samurai sword, transforming into a blue figure, swiftly striking with the Shimabara-style Iaido. But facing the peak condition of Death Walter, the outcome was already determined. She was strangled to death by the wires. The dual-gun priest, Heinkel, raised his gun in sorrow, only to be shot through the cheek by the captain. This time, no one could interfere with Walter's confrontation with Alucard. For this battle, he waited from his youthful frivolity to his old age. Facing the battle-ready death, Alucard smiled. But for Walter, defeating Alucard was his life's obsession. Alucard knelt on the ground, requesting permission from his master Integra for this fight. Since Walter had already forsaken his humanity, grant him death. Integra clenched her fist, and under Walter's persistent requests, finally gave the command, "Destroy the enemy on sight." And the Major's airship also arrived, inviting the decisive Integra aboard for the final battle, for she was now worthy to be his opponent. Seras also boarded the airship with Integra, where their battlefield awaited. As they departed, Seras and Walter said their final farewell. With endless bats fluttering, the battle between Death and the Monster King began. Both charged forward relentlessly. The razor-sharp wires under Walter's control directly shredded Alucard's arm. The immortal Alucard immediately regenerated, but then he was bound by the wires. Walter swung the wires, dragging Alucard's body, violently smashing him into concrete buildings. Alucard began his counterattack, firing wildly at Walter, then unleashing the savage Baroque Vizsla hounds. Death, Walter, easily dealt with them all. At that moment, from the dead demon dogs, the previously devoured Class A vampire Luke appeared. Walter used the wires to control Luke, manipulating the demon dog to attack again. Under the constant biting of the demon dog, Alucard suffered heavy damage, but Walter's newly modified body began to falter. However, how could he fall? To decide the outcome with Alucard, he had given up everything. He stood up again. With determination, he approached Alucard, ready to give his all. At last, Alucard had no strength left to resist under Walter's powerful attack. Then Walter, struggling, pierced Alucard's heart. But it was just a decoy of Alucard. She appeared behind Walter, whose body had reached its limit. He reverted to his youthful appearance, and Alucard transformed into a little girl. For her, this battle was just child's play. It was time to end everything. In the deathly quiet fog, a horrifying scene unfolded. The blood of all the dead began to flow towards Alucard. Walter's further attacks were completely futile, for Alucard was hungry. The revenge of the Hellsing organization on the vampires began. Inside the Zeppelin, the vampire army's dense gunfire could not harm Seras at all. Vampires attempting a sneak attack perished under Integra's sword. At that moment, a suffocating air of terror appeared. With the captain, his eyes crimson with bestial ferocity. Faced with such a formidable enemy, Seras chose to confront him alone. To her surprise, the captain actually pointed out the Major's location to Integra. Perhaps this was their own battle, requiring no interference. Amidst the raging firelight, Seras picked up 2 submachine guns and exchanged wild fire with the captain, wielding a modified long-barrel Mauser C96. Then Seras charged at him, his greatcoat completely obscuring her vision. Following this, the captain kept firing at Seras. The awakened Seras transformed her bloody energy into sharp spikes, launching a fierce attack on the captain. The captain got serious, and under Seras's frightened gaze, he transformed into a huge silver wolf. Then, with a powerful leap, he opened his jaws wide and lunged at Seras to bite. He then rapidly shifted forms, turning into a werewolf at a horrifying speed, and with an astonishing kick, he thrust Seras into the airship's cargo hold. Faced with such a powerful opponent, Seras wanted to give up. The captain also kept closing in on her. At that moment, the voice of Pip Vernaded came from within him, igniting Seras's fighting spirit. Seras dodged the captain's deadly strike. She was no longer fighting alone. Pip Vernaded in her blood would fight alongside her. She charged forward again, her bloody energy surging once more, countless black-red spikes piercing directly through the captain's body. But the captain had vaporized his body and was unharmed. Ultimately, the captain, with his eyes shining crimson, hovered on Seras's bloody spikes. His strength left Seras helpless. However, the captain unexpectedly kicked a silver tooth to Seras, his actions clearly expressing his stance. The captain launched another attack, his terrifying power once again sending Seras flying. Pip Vernaded finally found his weakness. It was a brutal close combat battle. Both their arms were blown off, and Seras even bit into his thigh. The final blow was dealt. Pip Vernaded appeared. He caught the silver tooth and drove it directly through the captain's heart. The captain's dog tag also fell to the ground, split in half. He had been a lone wolf in the wilderness, wandering the world alone, never having an end point. Eternal life was a punishment for him. His heart's sorrow and solitude continued indefinitely. But this time, he was liberated. He could finally dream a good dream. He believed in the supremacy of human will, pushing back the force of blood. Even on the brink of death, he commanded the brutal vampire army as a human. He was a fervent king of war, a passionate orator. During World War II, he was a major in the German Empire, with the Mad Doctor, using the remains of Alucard's lover from when he was Dracula to extract the essence of vampires for research on immortality and the creation of artificial vampires, but then dispatched by the Hellsing organization. King of vampires Alucard and the Grim Reaper, Walter caused destruction. Afterwards, to defeat the vampire king Alucard, he spent decades undercover, building a vast army of vampires. This hidden hunter, lurking from afar, gradually revealed his fierce fangs. The final battle had begun. Integra arrived at the command center of the airship, where the Major sat in his command chair. Bullets fired, swords pierced, but protected by specially made bulletproof glass. Integra couldn't harm the Major at all. At this moment, the performance began. In the scene, Alucard was devouring the sea of lifeblood of London, rebuilding the army of the dead. Above the surging river of blood, Warrant Officer Schrödinger, with a sinister smile, slit her own throat, killing herself and falling into the river of blood, flowing towards Alucard. All of this was part of the Major's plan. He formally declared to Alucard that he had won. Alucard, having absorbed Warrant Officer Schrödinger, began to experience confusion in consciousness, endlessly cycling through past memories, now merged with the consciousness and lives of over 3 million people. Alucard could no longer recognize his own existence. He turned into a quantum superposition state between existence and non-existence, a composite of imaginary numbers, to be exiled with over 3 million souls to an imaginary space. Under Integra's despairing and sorrowful cries, countless crimson eyes on Alucard slowly closed. He could no longer resist the drowsiness and bid farewell to Integra as if relieved, completely vanishing. Only a stone brick with a blood-red pentagram seal remained on the ground. The Major had won. After a long series of failed wars, he finally tasted victory. Then, Seras arrived at the command center. An angry Integra issued her an attack order. Seras's cannon couldn't break the bulletproof glass, so she directly grabbed an 88mm anti-aircraft gun from the airship. A shell fired, shattering the bulletproof glass and destroying half of the Major's body. They then discovered that the Major's body was covered in machinery. Having been severely injured during World War II, he had replaced his parts with mechanical ones. But in his eyes, he was not a monster. As long as his independent will existed, he was human. A being comprised of soul and will. A human with the appearance of a monster, whereas Alucard was just a monster with the appearance of a human. In his final duel before death, the Major blinded Integra's left eye with a Luger pistol, but he himself was shot and killed by Integra. Satisfied, he muttered to himself, "Hit for the first time." The Grim Reaper. Walter seized the last relic left by Alucard, a deranged laugh following his kneeling on the ground. This was not the outcome he desired. Just then, the dual gun priest fired wildly at him, seeking vengeance for Yumi. Walter did not resist. His life's purpose was gone, but he could not die yet. He had one last thing to do. He defeated the dual gun priest and, dragging his severely injured body, boarded the airship. He arrived at the laboratory where the mad scientist was packing up the research materials, preparing to flee and continue his evil studies. Walter resolved to end it all. "Doctor, it's over," he declared, as everything, including himself, lay buried there. At the moment of his death, Walter reverted to his elegant, elderly appearance. Integra, sensing something, mournfully called out Walter's name. Everything had ended. Seras took Integra away from this place of sorrow. The demolished London scattered with their relics, Maxwell's archbishop's mantle, the captain's dog tags, Anderson's bayonet, Walter's glasses, and more. The exploding falling Zeppelin also buried the Major, who died satisfied. 30 years later, on a night under a blood moon, an aged Integra slept. Below the blood moon, a surge of crimson energy slowly revealed the figure of Alucard. He had finally returned. In those 30 years, he had relentlessly slaughtered, exterminating all 3.42 million souls in the river of blood, and he had finally returned.